I want to go to get some thoughts from both Dave and Jimmy on the practice of what you're seeing a lot, taking a knee. You've all seen that in response to the George Floyd protesters, as an example, and to mark the introduction of some sweeping law enforcement weakening proposals by the Democrats in Washington a couple days ago. Democrat congressional members led by Speaker Pelosi and Senate Majority Chuck Schumer. Those two were joined with about 24 other Democrats, and they took a knee in the U.S. Capitol to indicate their supposed solidarity with George Floyd, whatever that is. Now, some days before that, numbers of police in North Carolina took a knee in front of protesters who had temporarily closed I-60 in North Carolina. Very strange picture to see, indeed. Police kneeling on the road in front of protesters. But then, as we've known, certain members of the NFL and others have taken a knee before the playing of the national anthem. So again, you know what I'm talking about. We've seen it a lot, but it seems increasing. I want to get a view right now. Dave, let me go to you first, if I can. And I thought of a number of ways to pose the question, but I want to go in this fashion to you. If you were one of the North Carolina police officers, would you have taken a knee before the protesters? And if you were, perhaps, because you're in Washington a lot, if you were a congressman, would you have joined those Democrat leaders in taking a knee in the U.S. Capitol in the way that they did it? If not, why not?
Sam, number one, I would not have taken a knee because when you do something like that, it's generally done and it is symbolic, but it's generally done as a sign of surrender to something. And I don't think those police officers in North Carolina had anything to surrender to, especially in that crowd. Certainly there were those that are the enemies of the United States of America. I'm not saying that all of them were enemies of the United States, but I'm saying that in that crowd and over the course of the last 12, 13 days, there have certainly been in these crowds of rioters enemies of the United States. And take a knee in that fashion, I think, is very unwise. To do what they did on Capitol Hill, I think, was a symbolic gesture. And by the way, that didn't turn out very well. It's gotten a lot of backlash for a lot of issues. But no, I would not have done it. And I wouldn't have done it for a scriptural reason. The scripture says, Sam, in Philippians chapter number 2, that every knee should bow and every tongue should confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. I think we should bow to him, and bow the knee before him is fine. Those that should do it but won't, according to Romans 14, one day will bow, and every tongue will confess that Jesus is Lord. But bowing before him, taking a knee before him, yes. Before the enemies of our country, and in many situations, enemies of Christ himself, absolutely not.
Okay, Dave, Jimmy, let me go to you. Dave used the word symbolic, and absolutely this is symbolic. They're all trying to show something. Dave used the word protesting. I'm not quite sure how he used it, but he said he would not have done it, and then he went to Scripture on it. Let me ask you input on this, because some people that I ran into actually passed along the picture on Facebook and others that they saw the police taking a knee, as an example, because at first glance they thought that it was an appropriate exhibiting of humility, or they thought perhaps maybe they were actually praying. Again, that was just a glance. But a lot of these pictures are out there. They're, as a glance, they're portraying something. So what does actually taking a knee demonstrate to you? And pick up on what Dave said. What does God say about taking a knee? And how should Christians in general be thinking about this action in these days?
Sam, Dave, I do believe, mentioned one, what I call a definition of a bowing the knee or taking a knee. He said surrender. But I would, in addition to surrender, add respect, submission, honor, loyalty. And that's all found in the passages of Scripture. Dave mentioned Romans chapter 14, that's verse 11, where every knee shall bow and every tongue shall confess. It's in the Old Testament, Isaiah chapter 45 and verse 23. That's the first place it's mentioned. And the Lord saying, one day you will take a knee to me and you will let your tongue confess that I am the superior being. Over in Philippians chapter 2, I love what the Apostle Paul said to the people in Philippi there in Philippians chapter 2. He was calling himself really nothing but Christ everything. And he talked about his humility. That word's been used in the fact that somebody would take a knee. But in Philippians chapter 2 and verse 10 again, it mentions that same phrase, all knees will bow unto me, every tongue will confess who I am. So I think that's the symbolic understanding of what it means to take a knee. And I'm going to be with David. I'm not going to take a knee to anybody except Jesus Christ.
Thank you, Jimmy. And ladies and gentlemen, I'll just tell you, that's also where I am, because when you bow, it indicates submission. The question is, are you submitting to men or submitting to God? That's the question.